Okay, so welcome back, everybody. So today we are going to be learning about expenses. So make sure you guys have your books out. And what you guys are going to be doing is you guys going to be helping me fill out some of these forms so then we can go ahead and analyze this stuff together. So we're going to be talking about expenses. Now, expenses pretty much revolve around everything that has to do with a bill. Okay. Um, and every bill comes along with a vendor. So today's chapter is going to be all about how to create a vendor, how to have a vendor bill you, and it's also going to be how we actually pay our vendors. Okay. So let me excuse me for a second. Let me go ahead and pull up the book as well. So I am with you guys. Okay. So QuickBooks 2018, and we are chapter 4. So there are a lot of few things that we will be looking at. Of course, we'll be looking at introducing you to all the ways that we can enter in either a bill or enter in a vendor. And there's quite a lot of ways that you have to actually know. Again, this is the whole point of me teaching you. The book only teaches you about maybe 2 ways to enter in a transaction. However, I'm going to expose you to every single way because you will, in fact, be tested on that. All right. So when you take your certification exam, they may ask you enter in a vendor. You have about 6 ways you can enter in a vendor. All right. The first one, if you try the home page, it may deny you, saying try again. And you try to go through the icon bar, you may have to do it again. So, etc., etc. So, make sure that you write down all this information and that prepare yourself, especially when you get your G-Metrics. Hold on, Talia is here. Okay. All right. So heading back to this, now the first thing that we're going to be introducing it to you is going to be the different types of vendors that exist in here. So the different types of vendors are going to be the different types of bills that you pay or the expenses that you pay for. So we have what's called cash vendors, and then the other ones are account vendors, right? And it's pretty straightforward if you think about it. Your cash vendors are going to be the ones that you pay either with a check, you pay them with cash, or you pay them with a credit card. Pretty straightforward. While your accounts payable vendors are ones that you receive bills and you owe them later. You have an account with them, you have a credit card with them, and they give you special discounts. That's your relationship to that vendor. So most oftentimes what you would notice is that those vendors usually provide a service or some kind of product to you. So we will look at certain vendors that provide either they're 1099 contractors, which provide services for us, or they could be things that we make purchases of inventory for. So that's going to be one of all those accounts payable type of vendor. Now, of course,
One question.
yes.
Now, let's say a same vendor is offering us in the two types, cash and sometimes on credit.
Okay.
In such cases, how we track them on this?
They're going to be identical in the same way. And I'll show you exactly because when we go through this whole entire thing, we'll get to look at the difference between manual check writing for our random vendors. We'll look at when we actually have to pay them with cash. And lastly, we'll look at entering a proper bill and being able to pay them properly. So I'll show you all 3. And yes, you can apply all 3 to any vendor. Okay, so maybe your 1099 contractor asked us, hey, can you pay me now, like on the spot, and then eventually after that comes later, they say, okay, how about I bill you and you pay me later. Any vendor can have the option to utilize all three methods of payment. Okay, entering bills and etc. etc. And we'll get to explore all three of them in the rest of the chapter. So that's a good question. And yes, any vendor can accept any form of payment. Okay. So the first thing is going to be, of course, how we enter in our transactions, of course, and setting up our vendors. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing is we want to create a new vendor. So we have a person that could potentially bill us or potentially be someone that collects some form of payment from us. So the book tells you a few ways, all right? And with this portion, I'm going to go ahead and show you the ways, but as we gradually go down in the classes, I will have you guys tell me what to do, okay? So one of the ways is going to be on the home page, right? You have your vendor center, and that's going to be probably by far the most important thing to do is when you're trying to get to your vendor or try to enter in a new vendor, the best way is to go to the vendor center. Okay, so right here, as you can see at the very, very top, there's a little tab here that says vendor, and the minute you click it, it will take you to the vendor center, which we talked about before, right? It's a list of all of your vendors. Every vendor that you click on gives you a little piece of information at the top of the window, and at the bottom of the right window corner, you see every single transaction that is involved with them. All right. And then if we go up to the left corner, right, you have a couple options here. You have either enter a new vendor or you have a new transaction. Okay. So same thing here. So let's explore that option again. So we go to the home page, right? First thing that you're going to do is you're going to have to get to the vendor center. Once you get to the vendor center, you're going to click new vendor and enter in a new vendor, or you can do it like a list. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so again, you could just do enter a new vendor there. Another way you could do that as well is you go to the icon bar and go to vendors, and that's also going to take you to your vendor center. All right, and then same thing here, you're going to go enter it in by doing new vendor. If you go to the menu bar and go to vendors, same thing, you got vendor center, all right? But there is no option for you to choose a new vendor, okay? So this one's very crucial that you understand this one, that on the menu bar, you will not see a new vendor or enter in a new contact or something like that. You need to go directly to the vendor center in order to be able to enter in a new vendor. Okay, so that is 3 ways you can enter in a new vendor. And the couple next ones is going to be, okay, so now we're at the vendor center. You can click anywhere on the vendor list and be able to create a new vendor. Okay, anywhere on the vendor list. Make sure you click on the vendor list and you can create a new vendor. Okay, so let's do that again. So anywhere on the list, you can create a new vendor. See, new vendor. Okay.
It's not right click, huh?
Right click anywhere on the list, and you'll get a drop down menu, and you can do new vendor. Mm-hmm. The other last way you could do is no, I think that's it for that one. These ones are going to be your transactions. So again, that's it. So as far as getting to here, there are only 4 ways that you can enter in a new vendor, right? The home page to the vendor center, and then new vendor. Icon bar, vendor center to the new vendor. Menu bar, vendor center to the new vendor. or if you're already in the vendor center, you can just right click and you have new vendor. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter in our vendor. So I believe on our new vendor, we're going to be looking at this chart here on let me see what page this is. On page 102 is primarily what we're going to be working on. And yes, okay. So once I'm going to go ahead and do right click, or I could do new vendor, and I'm going to go ahead and click new vendor. So here, this is what the form looks like. All right, pretty standard, pretty straightforward, and you're just going to fill in every piece of information that you can possibly about this person. Now, the date doesn't really, it does, depending on how far you want to, keep track of your vendors, it would be best important for you to be able to, when you create your vendor profile, of course, you want to make sure that you make it on the day of. But in this case, we're not going to be dealing with this vendor very often, but it's definitely something that we want to make sure that you toggle the date so you can keep track of your vendors on when you started doing business with them. Okay, but in this case, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to say today I just got a new vendor. All right, and the company name is going to be, I believe it is
Boswell Consulting.
Boswell Consulting. Okay. And then full name, it depends. You don't really have to have a full name here as long as you have the first name and last name. You can address them. So every time you enter in Mr., it will automatically address them and pull up any files that you have with them. I believe his name is Steven, and his last name is going to be Boswell, of course. All right. And then job title. What is his job title?
Owner.
He is the owner. All right. And then does he have a main phone number line?
Yes.
Go ahead.
510 555 slash 0305.
0305.
03, yes, 05.
Okay, so good. You may have a work phone number. This could be his mobile phone, right? But I don't think he has it there either. Fax, you don't have to have a fax number unless you are constantly working virtually. All right, so now does he have a main email?
Yes.
Is it Steve?
Steve at Boswell
Leave that Boswell.
right now. .us.
Okay, so therefore his website is going to be Boswell right now .us. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna try to get rid of this yellow thing here. Okay. Boswell right now .us. Okay. And now, as you can see, as I keep typing information, things start pulling together. All right. So what's his address here?
PO Box
Thing-
620.
Okay, so P-O. So he doesn't have a real address, but he has a post office box number. 620?
Yeah.
Oakland.
California 94610.
Okay. comma, California, 94610.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the cool thing is, if this is going to be his exact address that you also ship to, you can go ahead and go to copy, and it's just going to ask you, are you sure you want to copy all this information in? And if you go ahead and click OK, that means his shipping address is going to be identical to his billing address. Okay. And this is going to make it a lot easier for you, especially when you're receiving bills or sending a bill out, or when you need to send a product out, right? So this just makes it a lot easier that you could fill out a lot quicker. All right. Now, before we press OK, OK means you're going to submit this file into QuickBooks, but we're not done yet. We need to go through the left side, which is the panel on the left is going to be entering in extra details in regards to this vendor. So now I'm going to go ahead and go to payment settings. Okay. So does Mr. Boswell have an account number?
Account number.
I would say so because you're just filling up all the information right now. Once you have
Keep reading. Keep reading the book.
His account number is 66-112.
Okay. So as we gradually keep reading in the book, it shows you how to fill out his the vendor out completely. So making sure that you don't skip around or anything like that. So you just have to keep reading. Okay. So we have his account number. Now, does he have an actual payment terms?
Yes.
Okay, what is it?
2% 10 net 30.
So here, if I go do that drop down menu, right? We looked at terms list, yes, last class, right? In chapter 7 when we can customize our lists. Here you go. If I just click that little drop down little window, it's going to give me all the lists that I have for the terms. So you said 10%, 2% 10 net 30?
Yes.
So there you go. I go ahead and select it. So every time I create a list, it allows me to fill the information a lot quicker. So again, I believe the print payment's going to be to Boswell Consulting, or is it to Steve?
Boswell.
Well, consultant.
Okay, perfect. Do we allow to have him a credit limit?
No.
No. And then for billing rate, do we have a billing rate level? So what this means here is when we move into customers, you'll see that there's a list of people that you can charge them for. In this case, we don't have any. Okay. So the next thing is going to be tax settings. All right. What kind of tax settings do we have for this vendor?
His tax ID number.
Okay, so what is his tax ID number?
123-12-1234.
So 123-12. Say that again.
Dash 1234.
Okay, so he is now considering, because he gave us a tax ID number. Now, what's important about that is that means because he gave us his social security number, he is an independent contractor. Okay, so he's not his own separate business. He is the owner of his own business. So therefore, he's an independent contractor because he's giving us a social security number. And we'll talk about the difference between that in accounting. So if you guys remember, the difference between an employee identification number and the social security number is it identifies you whether you're a business or whether you're a 1099 worker. So the purpose of us having this person is going to be indeed so we can file taxes, pay them, etc., or they can use our information to guarantee that they can write off their taxes. So in this case, the way that we have it is just to ensure that they probably get their taxes correct. All right. So then the next one is going to be account settings. So here, what do we use Mr. Boswell for?
Professional fees says.
Yes, we use it for professional fees because he's a consultant, right? So by just typing in a few letters, so P-R-O, when my O comes. All right, here you go. It recognizes that I have an account for professional fees. And I'm going to go ahead and select that. You can either select it or you could tab it, whichever is your preference. And I believe that's the only one. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now we filled out that information. So when it comes to a vendor, right, we can tack on as many accounts that he is involved with. And by setting up accounts, so every time we use him, this is where the accounting goes behind the scenes. Every time he bills us, it's going to be charged to, it's going to be debited as a professional fee, which is an expense. So here is I'm giving it the second item or the equal and opposite debit for my bill. Okay. And then here we come to our additional information. So here, my vendor type, I have a type for vendors. I believe I have it as a consultant. Okay. And now this is where we come into additional or custom fields. So what county does he belong to?
Alameda?
Alameda, like that? Oh, I think it's E.
A,
ALA. MEDA.
M-E-D. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. All right, so there's Alameda. Now, I want to know a lot more than that. So I'm going to go ahead and go with define fields. And this is what we talked about in chapter 7 as well. Is I want to create other things. So I want to know what his spouse's name is. Okay. And I also want to know when he started his company. How long has he been in business for? Business start date. All right. And I'm going to apply that to obviously vendors because it's not going to be pertinent to my customers or my employees. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. All right. And usually there'll be a window and I'll just click OK. So I think I hit the wrong. Yes, I hit the customers. Okay. So here you go. Now they appear. So let's just say his spouse's name. So his name is Stephen. So I'm going to say his spouse's name is Mary. Okay. And I don't think I recorded. Oh, yeah, I did. Okay. And then business start date. I'm just going to say he established himself on October 11th, 2000. So he's been doing consulting for 20 years. Okay, now that I've added pertinent information that I've learned that's extra about this person, right? I can go ahead and complete my file and select OK. Now, once I do that, here he becomes the first person, not the first person, but usually it's going to be highlighted in green on your new vendor that you've entered in. Okay. We talked about this either chapter 12 or chapter 7. You are actually able to enter in vendors simultaneously, just like a list. If you have your contact list, you can go ahead and copy in information. Just make sure that your columns match every single person because not every vendor that you encounter will have these, these columns. So you want to make sure if you're going to enter in multiple items for multiple people at once, you want to make sure that you're able to, have them organized how you like accordingly to your spreadsheets. So yes, you can enter them in multiple multiple people at one time. Okay. So that is how you enter in a new vendor. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about activating classes, right? That's the next section here. So we finished entering Mr. Boswell. Now we're going to talk about activating classes and class types, or class tracking, we call them. Now, class tracking is a perfect way that you can measure your income and expenses and categorize them based on either location, profit centers, line of work. So for example, you have your admin, right? You have your admin, you have your sales, and you have your marketing. Okay, so all of that could be considered departments or line of work. All right. Another one could be departments, right? You could have children's stuff, adult stuff, women, men, right? You can have specific departments for each thing that you do for your classes, right? So what this does is it helps you keep track of your items or your transactions a little more, defined. Why? Because again, it helps you if you can use QuickBooks to your advantage by, I have 2 locations, and that's what Academy Photography is going to be doing. We have 2 store locations. We have one in San Jose and we have one in Walnut Creek. Now, how we're going to be able to split them is that once we defined how we're going to utilize our class tracking, now I can compare and contrast. Is my business in San Jose doing better than the one in my Walnut Creek location? Okay. So that's how you can use class tracking, all right? And we're going to show you how to activate that. So again, if you are a smaller company, maybe class tracking is not what is going to be useful for you until you start expanding and growing bigger. Maybe you have 2 locations, right? Maybe you have other profit centers, or maybe you do have departments that you want to categorize yourself for. So with that being said, in this Academy Photography, we use class tracking for our store locations. So we have 2 store locations again, San Jose and Walnut Creek. So how do you toggle or how do you activate your class tracking? It's pretty straightforward as far as this. You're just going to go ahead and go to Edit, and you're going to go to Preferences. All right, you're going to go to Accounting. You're going to go to My Company, and you're going to make sure that you have the option to activate class tracking, which right here, we already have it selected for us because, again, we can be entering, vendors that could be for our certain locations, all right? But in this case, this is more for your customers, right? Not all your customers are going to come from San Jose. They're going to come also from Walnut Creek. So good. So we do actually have class tracking active. All right. Another one that we're going to be talking about is how to use customer jobs. All right. Now, custom jobs or customer jobs is going to be geared primarily towards chapter 9 when we make our when we have billable time, and as well as keeping track of those specific jobs. And I'll talk more in details again in chapter 9. But all you need to know is when you're using customer jobs, it's basically linking any expenses that is to a transaction. For example, if you have a customer that wants a video to be recorded for them, you don't actually have someone on staff that does that. You're going to actually have to use a 1099 worker who's in the profession, right? That does the video photography. And you're going to link the job to that specific vendor or that specific 1099 worker. And that's what you're going to do here. It also is applied for when you make purchases for a specific customer. All right. And then again, we'll talk about that when we move into chapter 9. But activating your classes is very important, especially if you decide to further categorize your transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So that's how you activate your class tracking. Okay. So now that we have that, now the first thing that we're going to be is looking at our bill. So here in figure 414, here we're going to take a look at what a bill looks like. Okay, so here it tells us to pull up Wong and Son Production. So again, I'm going to go to my vendor center, whether it's on my icon bar or my homepage or my menu bar. And I'm going to go ahead and look at Wong and Son. So here, obviously, I don't have any transactions because today is November 2020. All right. So the best way of looking at a transaction or finding a transaction is that you're going to have to learn to utilize the filter tool over here. As you can see, the first thing that you see is that it's all transactions and that it is all, but you don't see anything appear because it says all transactions this fiscal year. You don't want that, you want all. And once you click all, boom, here is a bill that Wong and Son is currently billed us for January of 2019. Of course, these files are 2 years old. They are 2 years old. So, retrospectively, we're going to act like we are in the past. We're not going to do today's date unless I think it's applicable, okay? So in this case, here it is. I'm going to go ahead and double click that. And what's going to happen is it's going to open up the bill for us. So in this case, this is what we are recognizing, that we have a bill and that it's pending for us to pay. Okay, so here you go. If you look carefully, my bill I have, this is for the San Jose location. Wong and Son, again, are videographers. So there was a job that we had done, and now they're billing us for $142 for the service. So, okay, cool. So we'll talk about making payments soon enough. But we're going to talk about how you make payments. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that window. All right, so let's see what happens next. So the next thing is going to be looking at how we start paying our vendors. So again, we have 3 options on how you can pay your vendors. Okay, so the first one is you actually write a physical manual check, right? Every company, when you're out and about, you have a personal checkbook that is readily available, right? The best way to keep track of your cash or your money is by just constantly writing checks out, because that's going to be some form of paper trail. So obviously, you're going to have a separate set of checks that you physically have on hand, okay? Then the second option is utilizing QuickBooks option to also write a check. And we'll talk about that in a second. So QuickBooks, because it's different from an actual physical check, right? These are the checks that you're going to order using Intuit or using QuickBooks. And of course, you have to pay additional for that. Okay. But what they're going to do is QuickBooks is going to allow you to tap into your bank account. And if you do write checks from QuickBooks, you have the option to either have the file ready and you go into the bank and you print the checks for you, or you have the ability to buy the special paper, place it into your printer, and print out the checks for you at a company. Okay, and again, it has to be the special type of paper with the special holographic what do you call it? The holographic design, and the layout's already standard as is, okay? So that's one form of way, and you can buy those checks through either the bank or you could buy it through Intuit itself. And then the last one is going to be actually physically entering bills and then using bill pay to properly pay that transaction. So again, there are 3 ways that you can enter in or make a payment to your vendors, and we're going to talk about every single one. All right, so first one is going to talk about using registers. Okay, I've talked about this before. Okay, I've talked about this before when we use our registers, right? So we know what a register looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and expose to you again how we can see a register. So if we go ahead and go to the home page, right, and we take a look on our little banking side on our home page, you're going to see the first thing that you see is going to be the check register. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and it's going to ask you, well, which register do you want to open? Of course, we want to make sure that we open our checking, not our market line or savings or anything else. We're actually going to be opening our bank account. So I'm going to go ahead and go to checking, and I'm going to click OK. What's going to happen is now this is a register, and this is one of the ways you can enter in information, right? One of the 3 ways you can enter information. You can either enter as a form, a register, or as a list. And here is one of those ways you can enter in information. So how you're going to do this is, again, if you are physically writing a manual check, the way you record it in your book so it properly makes sure that you actually take that amount out of your checking account is you're going to actually physically type it in here. Okay, so you can actually type the transaction that has happened in here. Okay, yes? All right, now, before I go ahead and do that, I'm going to show you 3 ways how you can get to the check register. Okay, so I already showed you the first one, right, on the home page. So I'm going to go ahead and close this window out so I can keep opening. So I showed you the first way is to go to check register on your home page. Okay, the second way you could get there is going to be going up to your banking menu, and it's going to say open or let me see, it's going to be use register, right? So if I do that, it's going to give me that same window right there. Make sure that you click your checking, and it will open. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. And the last and third way is, of course, you're going to go to your a chart of accounts, and you can double click on your checking account, and boom, there is your register. Okay, so that's 3 ways you can enter in a transaction, or 3 ways that you can go to the check register. All right. So yes. So now that we're here, right, if we're using a physical or a manual checkbook, right, this is what you're going to do to properly record the transaction. Because once you write that checkout, right, it's going to pull out of your bank. And if you don't update your QuickBooks, then you're going to have, and obviously you're going to have a discrepancy in your checking, right? You're going to have things that you'll see that you may not recognize, right? And when you only will recognize it when you move into your bank reconciliation, when you're comparing your checkbook and comparing your bank statement. So this is how you record this transaction. So again, I'm going to go ahead and enter in this information here. So I believe the date is going to be anybody, when is the date going to be? February 8th?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in February 8th, right? So important thing about entering in dates is that you are not going to physically type it in. You're going to go ahead and click that little calendar icon and you're going to select your date that you want, okay? Never ever do you type in your dates, okay? You are going to click the calendar icon and select it. So February 8th, okay? Now, it says right here automatically it's going to drop right into 332, but that's not what I want. I want 331, okay? And this is where you can manipulate and make changes to your actual check number, right? So the first line is going to be your check number. Now, we'll talk about utilizing debit transactions or EFT transactions, right? Electronic funds transfer in after this, okay? So here I have my check number 331. Now, the next thing is going to ask me, well, who did I pay? In this case, this is a random store that I am going to pay. So Bay, I believe it's Bay Office Supplies. Okay. Now, when I typed that in, my list didn't show up. Okay? Because in this case, I went to a random store because I was just driving by and I was like, oh, I need to go pick up some printer paper. So I went to a random store and I have the receipt in case I need to make a return. But the most important thing about understanding that is if you do something like that, you need to record every person in case you make a refund or something, etc. Like, okay? So in case here, I put Bay Office Supplies. I've never been there before. And the minute I press tab, it's gonna say, hey, I've never recognized this vendor before or this person before. Would you like to quick add them? And in this case, because I've never used this vendor before, that's always going to be general rule of thumb is you can quick add them. And what's going to happen is QuickBooks is actually going to build a profile for them with the transaction that you just entered in. However, their detailed information is not going to be filled out, right? Just like when we went to our vendor center, right? And we enter in Boswell Consulting, right? That's going to be a vendor for us that we could possibly get billed for. So we need to know as much information as possible. But for this one, this is just us trying to finish our transaction and we can always go back and edit the information if we want to. Okay? So again, there's Bay Office Supplies. Now it's going to ask me for whether it's a vendor, customer, employee, or other. In this case, it is a vendor to us. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And everything else is going to get filled out. Okay? Now the next one is going to be for what amount. For what amount is this bill for? I think it's like $128.60.
Yeah.
Yes.
$128.60, right? Then, once you've entered that amount in, as you can see, before I move on to this transaction or I press enter, right, to validate my transaction, look at your amount that you have in your bank right now. I currently have $11,564 right now in my bank. Okay, and I'm entering in this transaction right now. Now, of course, when I press enter, that's what's going to validate and you're going to see your amount in your bank drop. But in this case, I'm not done with my transaction. I still need to fill out what account number they belong to. Okay? And in this case, I think they're office supplies.
Yeah.
So here I just type in 3 letters and obviously my chart of accounts pops up. Here I do have office supplies. So I'm going to go ahead and locate them there. Memo is going to be paper, was it printer paper?
Printer paper.
Okay. So now that I finished that, I'm going to go ahead and validate my transaction by pressing enter. You should get that beep of approval. Okay, so now it's up here. And what do you know? What happened to my cash? It dropped. Okay, so here, QuickBooks is automatically going to calculate everything for you. You don't need to do anything. All right, and there's the first transaction. So this is you physically going out to the world and writing a check, and you've already paid this person already. You don't need to do another check. Okay. It's already been done. Yes.
Granted, how to call this now? The interest shows the number. Will you be able to go back, or do you have to void that already, or is it automatically? Does that automatically print already or save where you can make some changes eventually before you?
We'll talk about that when we move on to actually writing a check using QuickBooks. This number 301 is the company's physical checkbook. So whatever number that you write your check for, it has to match 100%. And we'll talk about writing a check and what numbers can be assigned when we print them, okay? So we'll pull it back just for a second because that will be the next part that not the next part, but we're going to talk about using the write a check option, okay? So there you go. 331 is what you physically had, your checkbook, and you're copying down the information that you wrote the check for. Okay? And here is your transaction. Right? Now the next thing is going to teach you or show you or is that you can do split payments. Okay? Now, split payments basically means like when you go in here, this isn't paying portion here and portion here. No, this is talking about making a transaction and being able to split it for a certain class, or maybe you need to do it for a specific person. Okay, so what you can do is if you go ahead and double tap this transaction right here, what's going to happen is you now are in that write a checks window. Okay, of course, this is going to look different because I don't have any information in regards to the vendor, but we'll talk more about this in a second. But this is what happens when we look every time we enter in a transaction. This is what the form would look like. So in this case, this is specific to the transaction we just incurred, right? We wrote a manual check and now here it is. Now what we can do is we can split the expenses by placing a certain section in a certain location. So in this case, this example says that we did not just only buy printer paper. We actually had to pay for cable expenses as well. We bought cables from Bay Office Supply. So this amount for $128.60 is actually a check that I wrote all together for this vendor. But however, I want to come back and I want to edit this information because I know that I bought paper for my San Jose location and I bought the cables for my Walnut Creek location. So by doing this, okay, so for you guys in 2018, you actually have a little button that says split payment. 2019, I can just go right into it. I don't even need to click split payment. I can go ahead and just go right into it. So I'm going to expand out here, right? We have office supplies, and we have it for the total amount of $128.60. In this case, office supplies is only going to be, okay, so we actually bought $100 worth of printer paper, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and write in the memo, printer paper. And I'm going to make sure that I recognize that this belongs to the San Jose location. So I bought paper for the San Jose location. All right. And then what does my other transaction entail?
The difference, the amount of $28 for the cable.
Yes, but so it's going to be for computer and internet expense, right? Okay, so I actually am going to separate a second account by entering in an existing account. So I actually bought, okay, so I bought office supplies, but I also bought internet cables. Okay, and I bought it for the difference of 26, shoot.
2860.
Yeah, 28.60. Oh. I don't know why there's a gap here. It's supposed to be here for 28.60, and this one is cleared out. All right, and because I wrote the check out, it's going to calculate either the difference for me, or it's going to make sure that when I press enter that the values match. All right, in this case, here you go. I have $100 for the printer paper, and here the 28.60 is going to be for cables. All right, and I'm going to designate this to the Walnut Creek location. So Walnut Creek. All right, as you can see, every time I just type in a couple letters, you're going to notice that I've already entered these things before coming to class, right? Before teaching this. So this is a preset file that's already have the information readily for you. The only thing that here, so again, when I type in just the two letters, it's going to autofill, and it's going to ask you, well, are you looking for this, this, or this? And this is how it makes it quicker for you to enter your transactions. So here you go. I have my expenses. All right. I have my descriptions, and I have my separate locations I am designating these items to. All right. And yeah. And then now I can go ahead and click save and close. And then it's going to ask you, okay, you have changed this transaction. I'm going to click yes. And once you hear that beep of approval, as you can see, it says that you made a payment to Bay Office Supplies, but it says right here, you have a split payment, right? And it's split between the accounts that we talked about, right? We have one for office supplies and one for computer and internet expense, right? So, yes. So that's your transaction right here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and show you another example of another way you can use registers. So this is what I was talking about earlier. So we're going to take a break from the book for a minute. And now I'm going to say, well, maybe I went to Office Depot and I picked up some pens. Or actually, no, let's do another example. Okay, let's say on that very same day, So here, what's going to happen is it will keep track of your days. So let's say the very next day or the very same day, I totally forgot that we have a company party coming up soon. And I was responsible to buy all the party supplies. So I went to Party City and I went to go buy, party streamers, balloons, etc., all that jazz. And I decided to use the company credit card or the company debit card. All right? Cuz I'm the owner. So, if I need to do a debit transaction, right? Where does that appear when I make that charge? Where would you find your debit charges? Where would you find your debit charges? How would you know you made a charge to your debit card?
Statement.
On exactly on your bank statement. So this is where you can go ahead and when you enter in or when you do charge your debit card, that you're going to be using it the same exact way as writing a manual physical check. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a fake transaction in here. So instead of writing a check number, what you're going to do is you're going to actually type in debit because that's what you did. You did a debit credit card transaction. And when you do this, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to pay. And I'm going to say, what was it? Party City I went to. Party City. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and tab it. And when I click tab, it's going to say, well, I don't have an existing company like that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll quick add you. So the next thing is, are they a vendor? Yes, they are. Okay. And I'm going to say they charged me, I don't know, $56.98. Okay. And what account do I have? Let's see, do they have business supply or business expense? So they have building and improvement. So in this case, I'm going to say no. What else do they have? I'm going to go ahead and say they have supplies. They have office supplies, okay? Let's do another account. Now what you can do here, so you can also create another account as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say business expense. All right? And I'm going to go ahead and press tab. And then it's going to say, well, you don't have an account that like that. So I'm going to go ahead and create one real quick. All right? It's definitely going to be an expense account. Okay? And here you go, business expense. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. So now I've created an account called business expense. Obviously, I didn't designate a number because I have to go back into my chart of accounts to make sure there's a number that hasn't been used yet. But yes, you can quick add almost anything. So again, that's why I'm saying it's dangerous for for the bookkeeper because they can go ahead and type in a whole bunch of accounts that don't exist. That's why they always have to ask the accountant. So here you go. I created a business expense account, and my memo is party supplies. All right, and now I'm going to go ahead and click enter. So here, this is me showing that I've created a debit charge for party supplies. Okay, this is me using my debit credit card. All right, and you enter it in the same exact way. All right. Any questions in regards to just and using the register?
No, ma'am.
None so far.
No,
All right. So now that I showed you how to, when you manually do something, when you manually write a physical check, or you actually use your, company debit card, right? That's how you enter in your transactions using the register.
Only the owners of the company can use the debit card.
Yeah, only the owners can use the company debit card unless you know let's say someone needs to go, instead of like having to write a reimbursement check for them, which we'll talk about.
Mhm.
You can go ahead and give them permission. Okay, you know
Okay.
I'll give you permission to do it. Okay. Now, oftentimes when you have a business debit card, I mean, it's smarter to use a business credit card instead of a debit card. Um, but yeah, and we'll talk about credit cards way after all of this. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is going to be, well, what happens if you're going to be using the write a checks window. Okay. Now, go ahead and do write a checks window. Okay. Now, when you are on the home page, all right, right here underneath record deposits is your write check icon. You click that, it's going to ask you, the first thing it's going to do is going to fill out a form for you. And this is a standard check, right? It's going to have the date, it's going to have the amount that you wrote the check out for, it's going to have it's going to have the person's name, and in this case, QuickBooks is going to ask you, well, what is this transaction for? All right. So this is another form that we're going to fill out in regards to writing or using the write a check option. Okay. Now there's also a couple ways on how you can get this as well. Now, before I get into too much details, I want to also, because I was waiting for the next section. For the next section, which is entering a bill, but let's go ahead and talk about the way. So here is the first one, the home page. You could go to banking at the top of your menu bar, and you'd be able to write a check as well. Very first thing, okay? And then I believe you can use the bill tracker too. And we didn't talk about the bill tracker. But if I go to manage transaction, you'd be able to, you could write a check right here. Okay? Now,
They don't indicate the name of the bank.
what do you mean?
Remember, if you got issuing a check, there is a name of the bank on the side.
Yes, and QuickBooks will do all that for you. So when we talk about printing the checks, you'll see exactly what the check looked like. No, never mind. We don't get a preview of the check. But yes, it will have everything that's standard to a check. So check number, check bank account number, the name, date, etc. Okay? But yes, you can write a check this way too. Okay? And I'll talk about the bill tracker when we move into entering bills. Okay? Other ways you can actually write a check is by going to the vendor center, right? And you'd be able to go to manage transaction, and you'd be able to write a check here. Okay? And you'd be able to right click any vendor and be able to write a check as well. And you can also go to new transactions, and you'd be able to, let me see, receive bill, pay bills, purchases, receive items, okay, I guess you can't write a check there. But yes, so I just showed you about a whole bunch of different ways that you can enter in or write a check. The last one that you can write a check for, of course, is going to be when you actually open up a bill you have the option to write a check. But in this case, so let me show you again because that was a blur. So the first way you could do it is, of course, on your home page by clicking write a check icon. You can also write a check using the banking menu, okay? And click, banking, write a check, okay? You also have the vendor center, all right? Clicking on your specific person, so example, someone who has an outstanding amount, so Mr. Wong, you can go to manage transaction and you have checks, okay? Or you can actually right click them and you can write a check. Where is it? Write a check, right? And the last one is on the bill tracker. You can write a check there too. Okay? So those are the options that you can do when it comes to writing a check. Okay? Now, okay, so here's Nora. Okay? So now that we talked about that, I'm going to go ahead and just use the home page. Okay, so here is what a standard check should look like on QuickBooks point of view. Okay, it's not going to look like this, of course, going on for it. Now, the first thing it talks about is you want to make sure that you have the correct bank account that you're looking for. So in this case, I want to make sure that I'm writing a check out from my actual checking account, right? I remember, if you guys remember, there are options that I can write checks out of. But primarily, you want to make sure that you're taking it directly out of your checking account, okay? And here, if you do this, it gives you a little view of how much money you have in your bank. So this keeps track of your bank account, but it also keeps making sure that you, when you write out your check, that you have enough money to be able to write the check. Now, here, there should be options that you can choose from. And the option that I want to choose is going to be to print the check later. And I don't see it. Let me see if I have to expand this. Yes. So here you go. When we expand it, you can see that there's transactions above here that you can do when it comes to rewriting a check. You can view your previous check that you've written. You can create a new one, save it, delete it. Of course, we never delete. And here they give you options that you want to print the check now or you want to print it later. I'm going to print the check later, okay? When I select that, my check number disappears. All right, let's uncheck that and look. Now my check number appears. So the difference between printing your check now and printing your check later is that if you print your check now, it's going to assign the check number the minute you validate your check. And it's going to be in sequence from the previous check that you wrote. So the previous check that I wrote, remember, was 33331. Now, by me selecting that I'm going to print it now, it's going to automatically assign check number 332. Okay? But let's say I want to pay all my bills at once. So therefore, I don't want to assign anything just yet. Then I'm going to go ahead and select print later, and then when I'll show you how to print the checks, I can print them all at once, and I can assign a specific number if I wanted to. Okay? And there you go. I choose to print later, so therefore I'm not going to deal with my check yet. There's other things you can do as well as when you're doing a check, you can attach files such as, business cards and stuff. But in this case, it's okay. I don't need to. But yes. So here, I'm going to go ahead and write a check to, who am I writing the check to? let's see.
San Jose?
To who?
It says San Jose, enter San Jose run.
Orlando Properties.
Orlando Properties. Yes.
Orlando
Okay.
Properties.
So make sure that you also look at the images that they show you as well, because a lot of the times they'll tell you, they won't tell you specifically on what to fill out. They'll be like, hey, make sure that your window matches the figure from below. So this is pretty much what you're going to be looking at. Okay, so again, our vendor or the person that we're writing a check out to is going to be Orlando Properties. So by typing in Orlando, all right, here, you find Orlando Properties, boom. And everything that you've had this as a vendor has already populated. So all their addresses, etc., etc. And boom, it even associated that this person, that this vendor is going to be for a rent expense. And now this is where you need to fill out the information. Okay? So you can choose a couple options on where to enter your information. Now, they recommend you to enter it here at the very top. But if you are creating multiple accounts, then yes, you can type it in right here. All right? And it's going to match it at the very top of up here. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and follow what they say. So how much was it? I think it's $3,200.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And it's going to be for the San Jose location. So rent and then of course you want to make sure that you have your class setting too. So when you look back at the San Jose class list, you can see that this expense will show up on there. So it was San Jose. All right. So here we go. We have rent, and here we're going to write this check, but we're not going to do it yet. We're going to hold off and print it later. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Close. All right, I got that beep of approval. So if I go to my check register, okay, so let's go ahead and check that out again. If I go to my check register, it's going to populate right here. But it says right here, the check number is to be printed. So every time you enter in a transaction, whether it's writing a check, it's going to automatically enter it in right away. However, we have not sent this check out yet because there are two things that we're missing. We're missing the check number, but most importantly, we're missing the signature. Right? You can't send a check without a signature. Okay, without the approval from the owner. But as you can see, but it's done its calculation already. Now we only have $8,000 left in our bank. So again, this gives us a perfect depiction of keeping track of our transactions, even though we haven't done something yet. So in this case, I haven't even sent out my check or even paid this person yet. But it still updated my information up to the most up-to-date information. Okay, so that is how you just write a check. So this one's pretty straightforward and standard. The minute you write a check that's exactly how you use it. All right. So now we're going to talk about accounts payable. So any questions in regards to just writing checks? It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. No? No questions?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
All right. So now I'm going to finally introduce you to the accounts payable section. Okay. Now, there's a lot of information in here in regards to what you can and cannot do. All right. The minute you enter in a bill, right? And we'll talk about what that does, right? It creates an accounts payable, right? It increases your accounts payable. So this is where I'm going to talk to you about the bill tracker for, okay? And the bill tracker is something new to QuickBooks 2018, all right? So what this is the bill tracker. It pretty much keeps track of, obviously, all the bills that you have, right? Your purchase orders. It also, so here we have an outstanding bill for 142, which is the Wong and Son, right? We still have to pay them. And it also gives us a total of how many bills we actually paid. In this case, we paid 0 bills. And we owe a bill, and we have one that's way overdue. So again, due to retro's perspective, we're still going to pay them, of course, but we have a pending bill in our bill tracker. Okay? Now you're going to be able to, hey, what about my my bill from my Orlando properties? We didn't enter in a bill. Okay? So this is where I'm getting at, where if you use the write a check option, okay, you're making cash expenditures or check expenditures without receiving a bill. Okay? If you receive a bill and you entered in here, you absolutely should not ever use the write a checks window. Why? Because if you write a check, it will not associate or pick up that you're paying a bill. Okay? But that's 2018. In 2019, they've upgraded, and when you use the write a checks window and type in just the vendor's name, it's going to automatically pop up saying, hey, are you trying to pay a bill, or are you just writing a separate check for them? And yes, so that's the difference between 18 and 19. 2019, you can use the write a checks window to pay an existing bill. 2018, you cannot use the write a checks window. Okay? And you guys are being tested on 2018, so be sure that you know you cannot use the write a checks window. You must use bill pay. Okay? Or the pay bills option. Because the pay bills option is going to recognize that you're trying to pay a bill. Does everyone understand that?
Noted.
Okay? When you enter in a bill, you cannot use the write a checks option. You must use the pay bills option. Because every time you enter in a bill, it's going to increase your accounts payable. And by you writing a separate check without using the pay bills option, you're not making any associations or linkage to the actual bill that you're paying. So you're going to be reducing your assets, but your accounts payable has not changed. For 2018, if you need to use the pay bills option when you enter in a bill, because that's going to ultimately do the accounting in the background and reduce your accounts payable when you pay the bill. Okay? And you can pay the bill by using, obviously, the bill tracker. Okay? So if you go down to manage transaction, you have quite a few things that you can do. You can enter in a bill. You can pay the bill. Okay? So here you could do bill, or you could do the checks, right? That's their way of saying that you can pay the bill that way. Yeah, you can also right click them and be able to pay. All right, but that's just using the bill tracker. I'm going to show you how you can enter in a bill using the rest of the actual QuickBooks. Okay, so the first thing they say is enter in a bill. Well, on the home page, your obvious way you can enter the bill is this little enter bill icon, right? And when you click on it, it looks like a form. Okay? So that's just one way. You can enter in a bill by going to the menu and going to vendors and boom, enter bills. Okay? You can use the home page, obviously, with the bill tracker, but you can also go to the vendor center as well. So that's another way that you can do it too, is through the bill tracker or through the vendor center. And then I'll go ahead and talk about the vendor center. So here I'm at the vendor center. You have new transactions. Enter bills. Okay? You can right click on any vendor. So let's do Ace Supply. Right click on them. And you can also enter in a bill. All right? Last one is if you select a vendor. So for example, I'm going to click that Wong and Sun vendor that we have. So Wong and Sun. And right here, so on the right side is going to be dealing with them personally, right? You could go ahead and click Manage Transaction and enter bills that way. Okay? Using bills option. So I just exposed to you maybe 6 or 7 different ways that you can enter in a bill. You already have 3 alone by going into the vendor center. Okay? 4th one is homepage. 5th one is the menu bar. 6th one is if you use either or the icon bar to either go to the bill tracker or to go to the vendor center. Okay? So there's a lot of ways that you can answer this question. So with the QuickBooks, okay, you can be asked all 6 ways to enter in the bill. Okay, and that's the navigation portion, right? They say prompt is enter in a bill. So you're going to click and drag on how to get there. And if the first answer is not correct, you're going to have to keep trying until you get to the correct answer. Okay? So that's all the options that you can do for that. So in this case, since I'm already in my vendor center, I'm going to go ahead and click enter bill. Okay, so here's my little bill option here. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and enter in, what is this bill for? Okay, so I am going to be receiving a bill from Ace Supplies. Okay, and I got photo materials for Jerry Perez. Okay, in the amount of $360. Okay, so again, here it says at the very top, do I want to be receiving a bill from Wong and Son? No, I want to get it from Ace Supply. So here, I type in Ace Supply, and boom, it fills in the information for me automatically. When did I receive the bill? Okay. And reference number. Reference number is going to be your bill number. So all bills should have some kind of number so you can associate and you guys can keep your transaction. So what's my reference number? 2085. Okay?
So the reference number is based from the invoice that we received, or?
So be careful when using invoice and a bill. They're 2 separate things.
Yeah, that's what.
But yes, essentially to them, it's an invoice number. Okay, so for you, it's a number that's linked up to your transaction. So oftentimes, like if you receive medical bills, right, they'll say, this is bill tracking number XYZ, okay? So whatever the tracking code number is what you're going to place in your reference number. And that's what you are going to utilize to keep track of all of your checks, but as well as all of your bills, okay? And it was for the amount of $360, okay? And here, of course, it tells me that I have this, that Ace Supply gives me terms. Okay, they give me terms. So it's due it's due on the 10th of March. All right. But if I want to receive that 2% discount, I should pay within the 18th, within February 18th. Right. Memo is going to be photo materials. Perez. Okay. Now, because I'm actually making purchases for Jerry Perez, right? And we'll talk about that when we go into customers, right? Because Jerry Perez is going to be a customer of ours. Because we're making purchases for him, we get the option to increase our pricing because we're not going to sell it to him at what we buy it for. So we get to do a markup. And we'll talk about that again actually tomorrow when we deal with customers. So in this case, I'm going to leave it at that. All right. Now, the first thing it's going to say is, well, what did you buy for Mr. Perez? That cost you $360. In this case, it's a cost of goods sold. Okay. And it's going to be for photo, it's for photo materials. Okay. So again, instead of using office supplies, I'm going to change this and I'm going to go and make it a cost of goods sold. So here you go, cost of goods sold for $360 and its memo is going to be for photo materials. All right. And this is where I was talking about customer or custom jobs, right? So in this case, I can select anybody that's a customer in my list. In this case, it's Jerry Perez. Perez Jerry. Okay, so here my bill is complete. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and select, so if I pull my window up a little higher, I have the option to save and close. And then it says here, okay, one or more items have not been assigned. Oh, okay, so I forgot to assign it to the store. Okay, so what store is it assigned to? Walnut Creek. Okay, here you go. Now I can go ahead and save and close, and you're gonna get that beep of approval. So if I go ahead and go to Ace Supply, right? So again, Ace Supply, I have a couple bills and I've paid some of them, right? You see a check, bill, and bill payment. Now the most recent one I just did was this one on February to Ace Supply. And let me expand it out. Oops. Okay. Let's go back to the vendor center. Here you go. And I just recently just placed, I just ordered, or I just received a bill from them, okay? I can find that as well on my bill tracker because every time I enter in a bill, that's the whole purpose of a bill tracker. It keeps track of all of your bills for you. And this is where you can utilize this to see how many bills are paid and when they are due. All right, all in one place instead of looking at a specific vendor or a specific person, right? You can just find all of your information right there. All right. So again, now that I've entered in a bill, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to obviously pay for it. All right. So if we go ahead and go back to our home page, all right, you can see that every time you enter a bill, you follow this little flow of transaction, and the next thing it's going to say is you need to pay your bill. Okay? And right now it's 10 o'clock, and I'm going to save that for the next one. So let's go ahead and take a quick break here, and I'll show you how to pay your bills. Okay? So it is 10:10. So go ahead and take a 15-minute break. So please be back no later than 10:25.